Welcome to the Night Morgue. Now, this podcast is aimed to explore horror movies, horror series, horror books, ghosts, and their stories. For all things horror, tune in to the Night Morgue. And this podcast is free to listen to on Amazon Music, Spotify, and YouTube. Now, this week, we are going to cover the horror movie that inspired me to love horror. This movie is my all-time favourite horror movie. This movie as a child terrified me after watching it, and for a long time I was terrified at night, especially when the fog rolled in. 11:55, almost midnight. Enough time for one more story. One more story before 12, just to keep us warm. In 5 minutes, it will be the 21st of April. 100 years ago, on the 21st of April, out in the waters around Spivy Point, a small clipper ship drew towards land. Suddenly, out of the night, the fog rolled in, and for a moment they could see nothing, not a foot in front of them. And they saw a light. By God, it was a fire, burning on the shore, strong enough to penetrate the swirling mist. They steered a course towards the light. But it was a campfire like this one. The ship crashed against the rocks, the hull sheared in two, the mast snapped like a twig, and the wreckage sank with all the men aboard. At the bottom of the sea lay the Elizabeth Dane with her crew, their lungs filled with salt water, their eyes open, staring into the darkness. And above, as suddenly as it came, the fog lifted and receded back across the ocean and never came again. But it is told by the fishermen and their fathers and grandfathers that when the fog returns to Antonio Bay, the men at the bottom of the sea, out in the water by Spivy Point, will rise up and search for the campfire that led them to a dark and icy death. 12 o'clock, the 21st of April. That is one of the opening speeches of The Fog, and it kind of tells me what kind of movie it is. You've kind of got an old man telling a ghost story around a campfire, and that whole scene just sets the atmosphere perfectly. It's such an engrossing moment. The Fog came out in 1980. It was I suppose it's not the second film of Carpenter, but it was the third film he did after Halloween. So, in 1978, Carpenter took the world by storm with Halloween, which was made on a shoestring budget. It was kind of like a really cheaply made movie, but Halloween made big at the box office. And as a result, it kind of put Carpenter's name in the limelight firmly. So after this, Avco Embassy kind of approached Carpenter. He ended up doing a 2-picture deal with Avco Embassy Pictures, which kind of did this, The Fog, and he also did Escape from New York a year later. So, The Fog, where did Carpenter get the inspiration for The Fog? Now, Carpenter himself said the initial inspiration for The Fog actually came when he and his collaborator and long-term girlfriend at the time, Deborah Hill, were actually in England promoting Assault on Precinct 13, which I think they said they were in 1976. If anyone's not seen Assault on Precinct 13, again, it's a fantastic Carpenter flick. It's quite a nitty-gritty movie. It's a really good action thriller. But in 1976, whilst promoting the movie, they actually visited Stonehenge. So Stonehenge is one of England's, well, one of our most famous monuments in England. And the most unique thing about Stonehenge is, to this day, nobody really knows what it's used for or even how it was made. Now, some people have the theories of that it was a calendar. Others believe it was like a market. Some people even believe that it could be used as a burial site, where many others believe that Stonehenge is steeped in blood. In many dark ritual sacrifices were committed there. But again, nobody will ever know. But whilst they were in England, Carpenter and his long-term girlfriend at the time, Deborah Hill, that actually, whilst in Stonehenge, they were kind of looking around and they actually saw a fog. And at this time, the fog was quite a thick fog. And at one point, the fog had enveloped them whilst at Stonehenge, and Carpenter famously turned to Deborah Hill and said, "What do you think's in that fog?" And of course, the idea kind of stuck from there, and after Halloween, he came up with the initial story of the fog. Additionally, Carpenter did also say he did also take inspiration from the English horror movie, The Trollenberg Terror, which was released in 1958, which kind of also ironically dealt with monsters hiding in the clouds. And other inspirations was EC Comics. So EC Comics, as everyone knows, EC Comics, Tales from the Crypt, Creepshow. These are like horror comics that used to always have like a dark twist and a very gruesome twist at the end. Like, you'd have these questionable characters do stuff that's quite questionable, and something had happened that had caused them to actually get their comeuppance. These comics are cemented in legend. I actually do own some comics myself, but my lovely partner does consider me a bit of a sad git for that one, but the less we talk about one, the better. Carpenter did report whilst doing the DVD audio commentary that the story of the Elizabeth Dane being deliberately kind of wrecked by the campfire was actually based on an actual event, the wrecking of the Frolic, which I believe took place in the 19th century in Goleta in California. So again, it's where a fog, and people, what they used to do, they'd actually light a fire, where sailors actually mistook a fire for a lighthouse. What they thought was a beacon of safety was actually a beacon of death, which led them to crash against the rocks, and their ship sank. All done to try and take what was on the ship. And murder was often their best tool to try and steal from the rich at the time. Filming of The Fog took place from April to May 1979, over 30 days, with a lot of it being shot at the Raleigh Studios in Hollywood, California. Many of the interior scenes were there, whereas other locations were actually outdoor locations were shot on the outskirts of California, Point Reyes, Bolinas. The church, I believe, was the Episcopal Church of the Ascension in Sierra Madre. It was actually done really nicely. I mean, the budget itself wasn't what you'd call the greatest of budgets. I believe the budget at the time was 1.1 million. But what made the movie look so great was the cinematography. Now, the cinematography was done by Dean Cundey. Now, Dean Cundey became a long-term collaborator with John Carpenter. He did Escape from New York, he did The Thing, he did it for Halloween 2, he did it for Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, he did it for Big Trouble in Little China. He would also go to do the cinematography for the Back to the Future trilogy, Death Became Her, The Flintstones. He's done so many movies, Dean Cundey, and his cinematography in The Fog, he takes this almost shoestring budget and he makes it into something a lot grander. Carpenter was using Panavision cameras, so again, it made The scale on the cameras a lot bigger in the film. The fog, it looks beautiful. It looks gorgeous. It's a lovely shoot how they've done it. You actually believe Antonio Bay is a real place because it does feel like a really cool, really great seaside town. So one good thing about Carpenter as well, a lot of the characters who are in this movie are actually named after collaborators of previous John Carpenter movies. So Tom Atkins, he plays a man by the name of Nick Castle. So we all know Nick Castle. Nick Castle would be famous for playing Michael Myers in Halloween. So Tom Atkins plays Nick. Adrienne Barbeau, this was her first ever movie role. She was in television, but this was, I think, her first movie role, I believe. At the time, she was dating Carpenter at the time, and he came with the name of Stevie Wayne. And she plays the lighthouse keeper, the owner of KAB Radio. Here's a fun fact for you. There's a reason why she only plays jazz music throughout the movie instead of rock. So jazz was actually a lot cheaper at the time. And the character of Stevie Wayne was written specifically for Adrienne Barbeau. At the time, they were actually dating. She would go to star in another Carpenter film, Escape from New York, the year later. But she did become a famous screen queen after this one, appearing in likes of, Creepshow, Two Evil Eyes, and many other horror movies. You've also got Jamie Lee Curtis returns, but she plays Elizabeth. Now, what's interesting about Jamie Lee Curtis's character in this one? It's almost like a mirror reverse of Laurie Strode. So Laurie Strode, we all know from Halloween, she's kind of like... How can I describe Laurie Strode from the 1978 Halloween? I suppose she's kind of like, as you say, everyone describes her as the final girl, but I think she's the kind of one that kind of wrote the template for the final girl. In that sense, you've got... She's quite straight-laced, she doesn't drink, she doesn't sleep around. She's like the responsible adult in this. But her in this movie, she's kind of a complete mirror reverse. She's more relaxed, she's easygoing, she's a bit of a drifter. Hal Holbrook plays Father Patrick Malone. So Hal Holbrook is brilliant in this movie as Father Patrick. He brings a haunted gravitas about the role. Like, there's a particular sequence where he finds a diary and he's reading the diary out to Janet Leigh and Nancy Loomis, and he's kind of telling them the contents of this diary of his grandfather's. As he's reading it, there's almost like a haunted expression across his face. And the one line that he delivers, like, "We're honouring murderers," and he says it with such a bitter tang to it. It's just hits you. I know at the time John Carpenter had wanted Christopher Lee to be in this role. I mean, Christopher Lee was nearly cast in this, but to be honest, I couldn't see Christopher Lee doing it, to be honest. And I think if Christopher Lee was in The Fog, and if he did do Father Malone, I think the character in a whole lot different character. There's no disrespect to Christopher Lee. He is by far one of the greatest actors of our generation. The man inspired James Bond. In fact, he was the inspiration for James Bond. He's actually met Tolkien. He was in a rock band. Christopher Lee is, as I said, one of the greatest actors of our generations, any future and past generations. But one thing Christopher Lee will always be known as is some of the greatest villains on screen, So seeing him playing Father Malone as more of a heroic character, I just couldn't see it. I don't know if I'm being horrible there, but I just really couldn't see it. You got Charles Cyphers, he returns in a small role. So Charles Cyphers, as we know, was in Halloween as the father, or the chief. You've got Darwin Joston as one of the doctors. Now he came back from Assault on Precinct 13, and John Houseman plays Mr. Macon, the old man at the start of the film. telling the ghost story. Now, John Houseman was very interesting. He's a great character, and he would kind of go on a year later to play a similar ghost storytelling man in the movie Ghost Story. So again, that's a good film, and I'd recommend you check it out. So, The Fog itself, when Carpenter was making it, he did have a lot of issues making the movie. Now, the first initial cut of the movie, when they'd actually reviewed it, it was only 80 minutes. And Carpenter, when watching it, said he didn't think it worked. So they ended up doing extensive reshoots. So they added the beach scene with John Houseman's character. They reshot some of the deaths. So again, they added a bit more gore to it. They also tried to make the movie scarier. So some of the reshoots included, like, close-up death scenes, sort of stabs. They also added the corpse scene from the morgue, and also the lighthouse finale with Stevie at the top. I think Carpenter said roughly 1/3 of the movie came from the reshoots. At the time, Carpenter just didn't think it worked at the time, so that's why they reshot it. He wanted to add more like fear to it. And one thing I'll say about The Fog is the atmosphere is terrifying. It's kind of weird. When I think of John Carpenter, all his movies are very ahead of the time. I think of, Prince of Darkness. I think of They Live. I think of The Thing. And each of them are very unique, and each one very different. And kind of like they take tropes in whole new directions. But when I watch The Fog, it feels so traditional. The Fog is first and foremost a ghost story. It is a fantastic ghost story. I'm not going to lie, I'm very partial to ghost stories myself. And The Fog is just... it just kind of ticks all the boxes for me. You've kind of got a creepy ghost story, you've got a seaside town, then you've got ghost sailors. And there's always just something that just really intrigues and pulls you in there. It's like that, the unknown. Like when people look at the sea, people kind of realise that as humans we've only explored 10% of the oceans, and there's so much in the ocean we don't know about. And there's almost like an intrigue for the sea. And ghostly sea stories seem to, how can I, pardon the pun, but cross the waves. With the Flying Dutchman, the Mary Celeste. And the ghost story is kind of being passed down from generation to generation. It is a very great concept. The atmosphere of the movie and how it's shot with Dean Cundy and the soundtrack, it creates a very eerie, tragic, yet haunting atmosphere. John Carpenter did the score of The Fog, and the piano score, as I said, it's sad, it's haunting, it's mysterious, it's absolutely fantastic. And when you first see the movie start, you can hear the music, and it puts you into the scene immediately. The music helps bring that intrigue, the horror, and the fear, and also adds to the tension. Now, there's two scenes of mine that, as a small child, one of them freaked me out particularly. You've got Jamie Lee Curtis's character Elizabeth. She's in the morgue with a body, while Tom Atkins and Darwin's outside talking about what happened to the body. And as she's just with her back turned to the body, she's obviously upset, she's quite disturbed. Then outside, Tom Atkins' character says, "Did you feel that? It suddenly got cold in here." Then you feel the music begin to change. The pressure and the tension begin to rise as you see the body on the table begin to rise, and the music's just building and building. You can see the body starting to slowly stand up. It grabs the scalpel, and you can feel the audience. You're like, oh my god, what's going to happen next? And it's like, ooh. It was fantastically done. I'm not gonna lie, as a child, I was pretty creeped out by this. I love the look. I love the fog. I know at the time it was a nightmare to shoot, as Carpenter said. Like, they had to, a lot of the time, they had to use fog machines, but they had to shoot it in reverse to kind of create the image of the fog, because to try and get the fog to move in a way that actually looked natural. Because as we know to ourselves, fog mostly just goes against the wind, and fog machines kind of only work in so many ways. So doing it in reverse kind of gave them the impression that the fog could materialise out of nowhere. So again, it was easy to do, it was very cleverly done, and it made the film look very effective. Let's talk about the ghosts. Blake and the crew of the Elizabeth Dane. There's one thing I love about them. You never see their faces. They're like revenants, really, I suppose, because most of the time they're steeped in shadows, and it adds to the mystery of these characters. You do see briefly one of the faces and the glowing eyes of Blake, but most of the time they're steeped in darkness and covered by the fog. And that's what makes them look creepy. The fact is, you never see what they look like, and it's left to you, the audience, to kind of imagine what they look like. And that's one thing I think Carpenter kind of nailed there. It's kind of something I wish more people would know, particularly the Conjuring universe. I'm just kind of getting it out there. But it's not what you see that scares you. It's what you don't see that scares you. And when you see these characters, these ghosts, you don't see their expressions, you don't see what they look like, you don't see their rotting bodies. You just see the shadows of them as they stand there in silence, waiting for their vengeance. And it makes for a very, very creepy look, it does, because there's just something about it. It feels creepy, it feels eerie. And I know in the 2006 remake, they kind of made them all front and centre, and I remember watching that as a kid, and I was like, no, they showed his face, you can't do that. It's just, yeah, it was horrible to see that, but this is just a mystery of what they look like, and it's just, that dark revenance, it's just such an eerie kind of thing, because it's like, you got that mystery, you don't know what they look like, you kind of feel like, oh my god, these dark shadows are coming after you. Because it's kind of like primal fear, isn't it? Like, the dark, these guys are lurking in the dark, these guys are lurking in the fog. So, because one thing that we do as humans, we have that initial fear of the dark, we have that initial fear of what we can't see. And when we know there's danger around, we have to see it. So, kind of like, these characters surrounded by the fog, you can kind of feel like, what are they going to do next? And the whole movie is kind of like realising that there's no stopping these guys. There's no stopping the crew. They're coming for their revenge. And a lot of the film's themes is revenge. How revenge can transcend from beyond the grave. How greed has consequence. And when it comes hard. The story's main themes are of revenge and almost like town events. I would say long forgotten, but I believe long hidden, coming to light, makes more of a relevance there. The idea that a town that's built upon the hard work of many of its most respected elders, a town that's revered for its prosperity, and how they've made a small town and how it's boomed over the 100 years, just to find out that it wasn't built on the sweat of the men's backs who worked. No, it was built on blood and death of the sailors. And the fact is, they all covered it up, and nobody knows. But history has a way of rearing itself. I think there's a line that Janet Williams says. It's kind of like, there's not really much you can do about it. There's no change in the past. And I suppose very past events, there's no way of rectifying it. And I suppose with this movie, it does kind of leave that kind of forlorn warning there that what you do can never be changed. The fog itself, all the characters work brilliantly. I love all the characters in the fog. I love the music. I love how it's shot. I just kind of love everything about it. At the time, I do know, as I said, Carpenter was really not very happy with the results. I think, quote unquote, he did say it was terrible, he had a movie that didn't work, and he knew it in his heart. So after the reshoots, he did improve it, and they did release... Avco Embassy actually spent more money on the marketing of the movie than they actually did for the movie's budget itself. I believe they actually spent $3 million alone on just advertising the fog, which I know at the time included, TV spots, radio spots, and even in certain theatres, placement of fog machines. Now that would have been actually amazing to see. And at the time, it was given a good release. I know it was released in the beginning of February 1980. It did come out on a very mixed response by critics, with some critics loving it, with others kind of calling it not a bad film, but not his best. I know at the time, Roger Ebert gave the film 2 out of 4 stars, which commented which the movie is made with style and energy, but it needed a better villain. This isn't a great movie, but it does show great promise from Carpenter, which... Sorry, Roger, but I've got to disagree on that one. But I think at the time it did knock Carpenter's competence a little bit at the time, because, I think for me, The Fog doesn't get enough praise for me. I know in the years after, it has developed a strong cult following. It is considered a horror classic. I know Carpenter considers it a minor horror classic, and he said he's never been his favourite film, just due to the reshoots. But for me, I kind of wish it would be. I kind of think The Fog deserves a lot more love than it actually gets at times. And I think, because when everyone says John Carpenter, I think we immediately think of Halloween, we immediately think of The Thing, Escape from New York, we think of Big Trouble in Little China, but The Fog doesn't really get that shout out. See, I remember watching The Fog for the first time years and years ago when I was a kid. I came home from school and I'd played at a friend's house, and his brother at the time had actually mentioned watching it, and he said he was terrified. And when I got home, I spoke to my mum, and she said, "Oh, I've got a film I recorded last night from Channel 4. Yeah, I know, back when we could actually tape record movies. Oh dear, I'm sorry my age now, but and what's it called, man? It's called The Fog. So of course we put it on, and Bill Bailey was there, and he was introducing the movie, and I remember watching it, and I was, at the time, this kid watching it, I was terrified watching it. It actually freaked the hell out of me. There's one particular scene again, it's like, you see Adrienne Barbeau's character, Stevie, she's in the lighthouse, you hear the dun 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 music, and she looks up at the hills, and you see the fog coming over the hills towards her, and it's like, there is no escape. It is coming for you no matter what you do, no matter where you go, where you hide. It is coming for you. This is the first time I'd actually seen a child officially fully in danger. There's one scene where her son's in the room, and the sailors are at the door with a... before slowly trying to smash their way in with knives and swords and hooks. You think, oh my god, they're going to kill a kid. Oh jeez, God, it's... the atmosphere is... it's so heavy, you could cut it with a knife. It's such a heavy atmosphere. It's terrifying. You feel the pressure there, and I think for me, it will always be my favourite horror film. I think because it's the movie that, to me, that really inspired me into horror movies. I mean, I was terrified, but I loved every minute of it, and I think there's a bit of a fun in being scared when you're a kid, and I don't know why. it's almost like you're terrified of watching them, but you wanted to see more of it. And it's just that movie. When I watch The Fog, it'll always invoke that childhood fear for me, that childhood love of horror movies. That just makes you feel like being a kid again. Kind of like just watching it and feeling, oh my god, I'm actually scared now. And it'll always be a movie that's dear to my heart. And I think it's a movie that I want to see get more recognition. Because I'm going to be bold when I say this, but yes, I know, but it's probably my favourite Carpenter movie. And that's just, it's my opinion, I know, but it's just something about it. I've got a soft spot for ghost stories, and it does feel like that ghost story, and it feels like such a traditional ghost story. There's something about it that, no matter how many times I rewatch it, it still never takes away that love for The Fog. The only thing I can say before I end this episode tonight: watch out, Apostle Waters by Spivey Point, and look out for The Fog. Hope you've enjoyed our time tonight. I'll be back next week at 6 PM GMT. Until I'm back, stay spooky. Good night.